The top B2B marketing challenges companies face and how you can fix them. Welcome back to a fresh episode of BreakingB2B.com. I'm your host, Sam Dunning. And if you want to join thousands of legends enjoying podcast episodes, unusual B2B marketing and SEO tips, then why not join our newsletter over at BreakingB2B.com and hit that newsletter tab. So today I've got joining me Greg Kihlstrom. Greg is consultant, advisor, speaker, and author over at the Agile brand. He also hosts several top enterprise marketing podcasts, including the Agile brand, B2B Agility, the Innovation Economy. Greg, welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Thanks so much. Yeah, doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me.
No worries, man. Looking forward to diving in. So we never mess around on this podcast. We always get straight into the tacticals, the actionables. So with that, why is marketing so often a bottleneck for B2B companies, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of reasons, but I think, anyone that's done B2C marketing and kind of moved to B2B, I think there's some stark contrasts. Maybe if you've only done B2B, it's just kind of normal, but I kind of come from the B2C and work in both these days. I think there's complex decision-making processes that just don't occur. When you're reaching B2C, you're generally reaching one consumer. Maybe there's a household, but it's that's a much simpler thing than an org chart that who actually makes the decision, who's the first person you reach out to. So, part of it just gets down to like, who am I actually talking with and who needs to hear the message. So, that's one thing. I think there's internal issues as well. I'm sure you've talked about this plenty, the sales/marketing dynamic internally. There's some, sometimes it's a healthy dynamic and sometimes it's less than healthy, is just,
Sure.
just how that goes. And then, even just, I guess getting back to the first part of, just figuring out who we're reaching, just attributing ROI. And, so if we don't know exactly who we need to reach, and if the sales cycle is super long because we've got 20 people we need to sell into in the org, like, what made the difference in the sale and what was marketing's contribution to that versus sales and all that. So, that's the short version, I guess. It wasn't even that short.
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, I've seen hands on a lot of these. And I think the first one is great. The fact that when it comes to B2B, we often forget that there are, especially in the higher you go with average contract value, the bigger ticket the item, usually the more folks that will be involved, the more execs that will be involved in that buying process. And so often, and I've been guilty of it in the past as well, we forget that we're not just marketing or advertising to one person, but there's a whole team that need to get bought into the concept, to the problem we're trying to solve, to the value that we're bringing, to the solution itself, to the financials, the commercial value. So it's a whole suite of team members involved, opposed to just one person that we need to get the green tick from.
Right. Yeah. And it's, it takes, on the sales side of that, it takes psychology to understand some of this sometimes. I've as a consultant and I owned an agency for a while as well. I've been on the sales side of this as much as I've been on the marketing side as well. And so, marketers can write the most effective marketing copy and be on social and do the right advertising and all that stuff. But, sometimes it literally comes down to a phone call between two people at a C level that you're just not going to reach with marketing. And so, I think that's what makes it complicated, but it doesn't make it impossible. It just makes it more complex.
Mm-hmm. And then the second one, sales and marketing handoff, or was it sales and marketing handoff? Or was it sales communicating with marketing? Or
it's kind of all of the above, right? It's like, it kind of depends on the org, right? It's like in some cases there's a really, there's a healthy, even you could almost call it rivalry, but like there's a healthy dynamic of, okay, well, marketing, everybody wants the win, but marketing wants their share of the win. In less healthy environments, sales kind of rolls their eyes whenever marketing tries to do something, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, do what you want, but we're actually the ones that end up making the deals. And I think in the healthy scenarios, it's sales and marketing communicating really well with each other. In the unhealthy ones, there's the classic silos, and everybody just kind of thinks the other is stepping on their toes almost.
Yeah. So we can dive into that in a bit more depth in a sec. And was the other one you mentioned, Greg's marketing's contribution, or was it?
Yeah, just attribution, and how do we actually measure ROI in all of this, and who was responsible for that?
Got it. Okay, good stuff. So let's start with those three. So multiple decision makers involved. I suppose not so much for lower ticket items. If we're talking like Saas, like, I don't know, $10, $20 a month, like small ticket, where it's almost a no-brainer. If you need the offer, you might even self-serve yourself on the website and sign up there and then for simple things like calendar tools or similar. But I imagine this is more applicable as we go up to more complex deals and bigger sales cycles, more complex kind of buying committees and all that good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I deal quite a bit in the enterprise space, so a lot of this is coming from that world. So yeah, definitely. And even in the enterprise world, if to your point, if you're talking to $100 a month or less for a product, then there's discretionary budget that would go towards that. So that doesn't apply. But once you get north of some of those figures, then yeah, generally speaking, you got to figure out, and there's software to help map org charts and decision makers and all that. And I've seen some of those maps, and it gets crazy, and it changes, and it, because there's constantly turnover and all that stuff too. But you have to kind of have a strategy of, okay, we're gonna reach that junior mid-level person with some content and get them engaged, and we know that person is going to influence upwards and stuff. So that's some of this gets down to ABM, like account-based marketing strategies, and like, okay, well, how do we get our foot in the door, and then who do we actually need to influence? A lot of the marketing part of this versus sales is how do we just capture attention and get some awareness there from someone, probably again that's working in an analyst capacity, and just needs to show some options to their manager or someone above them, and then then generally there's probably going to be a sales handoff at that point.
How do you usually advise companies when it comes to mapping out who's involved in these kind of process in terms of their ideal client profiles and who they might need to target?
Yeah, I mean, I wish it were easier, because there is no one way to structure an organization. So it's or a department or even a team. And so, I caution to not overcomplicate the process. And I work more on the marketing side than I do on the sales side in
Sure.
that advising. So on the sales side, like I said, I've seen, I forget the names of the platforms themselves, but even a good CRM should have some of this stuff in it. But they'll map that kind of decisioning process. On the marketing side, I think we keep it a little simpler, and we just say, okay, we're probably talking to, I'll just pick an arbitrary. We're probably talking to 3 levels of people here, and one level is like responsible for just Googling, I have XY problem, and so what are the best solutions for my industry or whatever. So let's create some content around that. Then we're probably gonna have to get one level up from that. What are their problems? Kind of even going through the funnel stage, like general awareness versus a little more informed, and creating competitive sets. And then in B2B, if we were talking B2C, it would be, we try to get them to convert and purchase or something. Generally speaking, with B2B, then it's like, okay, how do we get this person to talk to a salesperson and close the deal?
Yeah. And I'm guessing customer research plays a a decent part in this to actually understand how those target prospects you're going after typically buy. And like you say, if it is a larger scale enterprise deal, it might be once you kind of speak to some recently won clients, you understand that they usually have one of their analyst teams, like you say, do a Google search, and then they'll pull some information, then maybe share that with their manager.
Right.
And then from there, they perhaps bring on board the exec team, and then eventually finalize three vendors that then they'll have more detailed conversations with. And I guess just getting to grips with that flow of how your target market actually like to research. And
I think it also comes down to, then what's the role of marketing in that, when you're halfway, 3/4 through the funnel, like what's the role of marketing in that, because you want to complement the sales team, but you don't want to step on their toe. If the salesperson just had a really good conversation about a feature of the product or service that they're wanting to buy, and you send them a marketing email that's like way out of left field and has nothing to do with that, then all of a sudden you're actually creating friction in the process, not helping. So it's that requires alignment with marketing.
You mentioned about providing content to influence. Any tips that kind of B2B companies should consider on this strategy?
Yeah, I mean, just being aware of where the customer is, in that process, so if they're, I look at the journey, and it's not that different from B2C. It may just be quicker with B2C versus B2B, but it's like, at the awareness stage, like the company doesn't even really know. They know they have a problem, but they don't know what the solution to their problem is. So they're looking they might be looking for you and someone that you don't even consider a competitor, because they don't really know what problem they're trying to solve. So like that initial stage, and it's probably some of this is a little bit like, marketing 101 even, but like just try to educate them on, okay, this is the problem that we solve. Because the other thing you want to protect yourself against is, it's nice to have leads, but man, it's costly to have a bad lead that's not a good fit. So, it would be better to lose a lead that was never a good fit in the first place than to just kind of take up marketing and sales time and all that stuff. So, get the right people in the funnel, and then get them to the next stage, which is they're comparing you against your actual competitive set. At that point, you're diving in on differentiators and all that kind of stuff. You're assuming they know what the problem is that they're trying to solve and how it likely gets solved. So, just again, tailoring your content based on where someone is. And then, when they're further in the funnel, then it's really talking with your sales team and being like, okay, what would help? What would influence at this point? Is it an automated email, or can we give you a PDF or a webinar link to like send them manually? And, how can marketing support and not, again, stand in the way?
So are there many mistakes you see when it comes to, because I've seen plenty when it comes to serving content to the prospects, especially when we're talking bigger size deals. Because I know one I see a lot is kind of forcing folks to do something too early. Something I talk about on B2B websites all the time. Like there's call to actions like smashed through every page. Like I can understand on a homepage and your main menu now have to direct someone to book a demo. But if someone's researching something like how to do XYZ or best ways to do Z, and they stumble upon an article that might be educational, but at the same time trying to position your offer as the solution to that problem, if you're trying to force a demo down their neck 3 seconds within first seeing your company for the first time ever, it might be a little bit too pushy. You might want to consider guiding them to some more content, or to a podcast, or to a bit more educational material. But I'm not sure if you see kind of companies make similar mistakes or any different ones.
Yeah, totally. And I think this is completely agree with what you're saying. And I mean, this is where I see the shift to, and you already mentioned, this idea of self-service is so big, because, I don't, some B2B marketers may forget, like we're all B2C, we're all consumers in real life, right? At work, we're B2B buyers, but in some cases, but we're so used to this, like everything, at a moment's, within moments, and customizable and this and that. And I don't know about anybody else, but like, I don't like talking. don't look forward to talking to salespeople on the phone. There are times when it's very appropriate and I wouldn't want it any other way, but those times are seldom. And, you know, I think this move to a self-service and like, let me try something out. Let me look at it more deeply before someone is like hounding me to buy something and sign something. You know, to your point, even the call to action on a page, like it feels intrusive when you're just not quite there yet. So I see this self-service trend in general as just a positive. And I know a lot of salespeople and B2B orgs out there are reluctant to try it. I totally get why. They're worried. You know, if only we could talk with them, we'd, you know, cinch the deal or whatever. But
yeah,
I think it's a false premise.
Yeah, I think we're on probably we're singing off the same hymn sheet on that side of things,
Right.
because I'm constantly talking that so many B2B companies are, I call it scared at being transparent, in the sense that they want to capture quote unquote leads at all costs through their website or through their landing pages or through their initiatives.
Right.
But as a result, because you're pushing so hard to capture that contact information, a lot of those folks, a lot of those, call them MQLs, call them leads, whatever you want to call them, are going to be not qualified because you have forced them to speak to sales. So whether that's hiding your pricing on your website, whether that's not openly sharing a demo or a video run through of how the tool or the software works, or not addressing some common objections or questions that you get raised on sales calls on key pages. It's just, it might feel like those things add more friction, but at the same time, they give you less quote unquote leads, but they give you more qualified conversations, which probably is going to make your sales team a bit happier, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think it's consumers, whether they're B2B consumers or B2C consumers, you know, consumers are just getting smarter about all this stuff. We're getting wise to like old school marketing tactics, and you know, some of it is generational, but it's not all. I mean, I'm not Gen Z or millennial, you know, like you know, there's a lot of people that are getting wiser to these old school tactics that are just, you know, maybe they worked, or maybe they were just the only way that it was done. I think these days there's better ways. And to your point, there's a cost to acquiring an MQL that isn't really an MQL, right? So like I think that's what smart organizations are seeing, is like, okay, yeah, we get a few less leads, but we get better leads, and we're wasting less salesperson time, and we're frustrating. I mean, those customers that may not be great customers now, they may be good customers later, but they may be so frustrated with your sales process that they go to your competitor because they had a bad experience. So it's, you know, it's thinking a little bit longer term about all this stuff helps as well.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I do see the other side of the coin, because I know a lot of B2B companies, especially in tech, might be VC funded. So they might have a ton of pressure to hit certain MQL or lead goals. And that almost encourages a lot of those bad habits. So things like hiding pricing, hiding a demo, trying to get someone to fill out a form at all costs. Even though in the back of the marketing team's mind, they might think, I know these leads are going to be qualified.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's true. It's there's competing priorities, right? It's hard to balance them, but you know, ideally you strike the best balance you can.
Yeah, cool. Let's move on to the second one. So sales and marketing handoff / rivalry. Who gets the credit for the win? Talk us through kind of some issues you see around this, Greg, when you're dealing with B2B companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, it comes down to this whole idea of attribution, and you know, there's lots of ways of calculating attribution, but in a purely like digital process, you could say, you know, there's the first touch or a last touch attribution. There's more complex ways of doing it as well, of course, but just to simplify things here, you know, if we were to do last touch attribution for every single B2B lead, sales would always get the credit for everything, right? So you know, that's kind of the world that a lot of businesses still live in, is okay, yeah, you know, what is there's kind of a question of the value of marketing. And you know, I could say there might be a legitimate reason for that marketing really isn't bringing in as good leads. Or to what you were just saying, maybe there's also external pressures that are not getting the best leads. But that aside, how things are attributed, when it becomes a rivalry of like, oh, well, sales always closes the deal, so what did marketing really do in this? That's not a setup for success. That's a setup for, just a dysfunctional relationship at best, I would say. Better would be this really close communication of sales telling marketing what they need and marketing listening to what sales needs, and having a true handoff of and a true partnership in that. And I've seen that. I've talked with places where that exists. It's not, I know it sounds utopian, but it does exist. It's just, I think the norm and kind of the stereotype is this sort of setup of like, well, what does marketing really do?
Who knows, right? They just go online, hang out on LinkedIn, and do a few social posts, right? Well, I'm awaiting the hate mail from a few thousand B2B marketers as I speak. So with that, but I know you said sales telling marketing what they need and vice versa. Do sales know what they need though, Greg, from your experience? Or
it's a great question. It leads everybody to need to be more data driven, and I think that's a big challenge. And that's, I'll pick on sale. I know I was picking on marketing for a minute there, but like, to pick on sales a bit, there's a lot of reliance on, the talented salesperson that just has the right like gut instinct, and this worked really well at this place with this in this scenario, this anecdotal evidence. And that works until it doesn't, and it doesn't more often than it does. And sorry for it's a little convoluted there, but in other words, we need to get much more data driven. Sales needs to get way more data driven. The sophisticated orgs that are really being smart about data driven strategies and approaches, and the marketing teams that are getting really smart about data driven approaches, when those teams talk together and share real stuff, not just like, again, the anecdotal stuff of like, oh, well, I did it this way at this place and I made my quota. How is that helpful in 2024? So I think it comes down to data and really being driven by that stuff. And that's a tough thing to overcome. There's egos to overcome, which are really tough to overcome.
Have you got any examples of kind of how you should be using data and what data points that both the marketing and the sales side should look to work on?
Yeah, I mean, I think just trying to align to the same end goals and KPIs, whatever those might be. I mean, marketing's going to have their own, KPIs, and sales will have their own as well. But if we can align to the same dashboard, a joint dashboard, so to speak, of, okay, let's look at, okay, well, this was a lead we made, we made X amount of dollars in gross revenue from it, but what was the cost of that lead? When we start getting like cost per acquisition, CAC, stuff a little bit deeper, or even, lifetime value of a customer, when we start looking at these deeper metrics and then start working backwards from, okay, well, what did it take to do that? Like marketing spent a ton of dollars on advertising to that specific customer, sales spent a bunch of time. All of a sudden, the value of that lead, as anecdotal and, great as it is to have this logo on our site or whatever, like the cost of that lead, the value is not very high. And so getting everybody to actually be driven by those kinds of conversations, then we start getting away from, again, this anecdotal stuff and this gut instinct and all that. Got it.
So working together to the same North Star metrics, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a much shorter way of saying it than I did. Yes.
It sounds a lot fluffier though. It's a lot easier for me to say now you've said it. So when it comes to attribution itself and claiming credit, what do you see works well for B2B companies in general? Because I know there's so much you could dive into on an attribution side, right from initial, how did you acquire the lead? There's been a lot of conversation over the last couple of years about adding fields into your calendar booking or your inquiry forms around how did you hear about us, because you don't necessarily want to rely on a last click, which might flag up as they inquired through a Google ad or Google search or elsewhere, when they actually first heard your CEO on a podcast, then followed your company on LinkedIn for half a year, then read a bunch of your blogs, then clicked a Google ad. And then obviously right through the funnel, if it's a large scale deal, they might consume a ton of your content, speak to a few of your sales team, consume a bunch of your ads on LinkedIn, continue to listen to your podcast, then eventually sign the contract. So there's so many touch points, both from before they've engaged you with a company right through to when they've eventually signed the contract and paid the check.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's not a straightforward and simple thing. And I mean, you just described some great examples of, man, that's really hard to, I wish that we had better podcast metrics than we do of like literally who's listening and all that stuff. But
yeah,
all that stuff aside, it's to make data-driven decisions, you need better data. And so, do it where you can, and where you can't, it is what it is. But like, this is like the classic salespeople need to update their CRM, and marketing needs to just do the best possible attribution that you can. And this is where, I mean, like customer data platforms, CDP is a lot more common in the B2C space, but this is where CDPs are starting to, from what I'm seeing, make some more inroads into the B2B world. It becomes super challenging with the, there's 10 different people at a company that might be, accessing on 20 different devices and all that stuff. Like, it becomes a real challenge, even for a good CDP to unify all this stuff in the right way. But it's start with where you can start, which is like, when you talk with someone, fill out the record in the CRM, like do what you can. And then, the rest, do your best. To your point, ask where you can. People don't always answer in the right way, or not even intentionally, but to your point, they may have actually seen a podcast episode 3 years ago and forgot that they did. But do the best that you possibly can. But that's not a reason to say, oh, it's too complicated, let's not try. It's just a reason to get better and better, as good as you can.
Got it. Cool. So we've talked about kind of dealing with multiple folks in the decision process. We've talked about kind of attributing deals and sales and marketing working together. To wrap up, Greg, is there any other kind of painful ones that you see on the marketing side when you're dealing with B2B case?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what I try to focus on these days is, taking marketing further with things like personalization. And, I don't think that we mentioned AI yet today. So like, of course, I feel like it's obligatory these days to at least mention it. But like, this does become challenging. How do you personalize when you don't know all the roles in the company and who exactly you're talking to and what stage they're in? So, I think marketers are getting a lot of pressure to use AI and do personalization and do all that stuff, but they're challenged because for the pretty much every reason we've already discussed, like they don't know where someone is in the org. They don't know what stage they're in. They are not even always necessarily sure what's going to be the most helpful thing at the stage that they're in. So I think it just all comes back to, get the best data that you can and map out things both internally to the org you're selling into as well as possible, but also your own stages that you want to guide people through. And you got to start somewhere. And so it's not going to be perfect, but I mean, I'm a huge proponent of Agile principles, and, you got to start somewhere and iterate and get better from there.
How much do you think B2B companies should lean into AI? Because I've probably got quite a bad perspective compared to yourself. Like, I've seen so many websites where they've come to us to help with SEO, but then we've ran their content through like AI generators, and we're like, 80-90% of this is AI generated. Like it's full of words like supercharged, 10x, like tech wizardry, and all these words that your prospect would never say in a normal day-to-day conversation. And at the same time, it's probably not really gonna rank on Google, let alone resonate with those folks who actually want to build trust with and convert. So I'm probably at the bad end of the AI spectrum on using it as a kind of too much of a tool rather than a sister. But I'd like to know what your thoughts were.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, first of all, you need to have a really good use case for it. So, I mean, I write a newsletter called AI Isn't a Goal or a Strategy. You have to have a use case that AI can be applied to. And there's lots of cases. I mean, please don't just get it to write your website content but for any reason. It doesn't mean that it can't help you write your website content, but don't just like go to ChatGPT and say, I need a homepage and I sell widgets. Definitely not the right approach. Like, what's the problem you're trying to solve? I mean, this doesn't just apply to AI. I think it applies to life. It's like, let's pick the biggest pain points that we have. If a big pain point is creating content, find the parts of the content creation process that AI could be helpful with, but not ruin things by, to your point, using weird words and stuff like that. Like, okay, we need an outline for a page. Okay, cool. Go to ChatGPT and like say, hey, I need an outline for a product page and here's what we sell. Give me some ideas, and then write the content for it, because you know it better than than a large language model might. So but Gen AI, that's not even the only way that AI can help. I think there's a lot of efficiency improvements, and I use automation all day long, every day, to help myself, because I run a pretty lean operation, but I can get a lot done because I automate a lot of things. So that's a whole other way of looking at AI. Predictive analytics, that's a whole other way of looking at AI as well, on propensity churn, all of those kinds of things. So it's like, I think when the smart orgs that are using AI well they're really looking at, we don't have to just use it the way that someone told us we could. Like, let's solve some real problems and real pain points, and then apply, but test and make sure that it works first, and then then prove the model, and either it works or it doesn't. But if it's proven, then keep going.
Nice one. Nice way to wrap up. So with that, Greg, appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Please do share more about how the audience can learn more from yourself, connect with you, and the best way to get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. So couple things. So I'm very active on LinkedIn, so please reach out. Would love to connect with you there. I host a B2B podcast of my own called B2B Agility. You can find it on Spotify, Apple, pretty much anywhere. So would love for you to take a listen and let me know. And you can go to my website. It's 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗁𝗲. So and would love to see you there as well.
Awesome, man. And we'll check all of those links in the show notes below. And with that, I want to thank you once again for coming on, Greg.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really enjoyed it.
No worries, man. And as always, if you did enjoy today's show, why not check out the newsletter over at breakingb2b.com and join thousands of legends getting our unusual B2B marketing tips, SEO ideas, and checking out recent episodes. And with that, I want to thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one for more no BS B2B marketing tips to grow your business and grow your revenue. Catch you on the next one.